Hello, I'm Tom Banks, editor of Design Week magazine, and welcome to the Brand Insight panel of the D&AD Awards. Shortly, I'm going to be speaking with experts who sat on different juries this year, meaning they've been looking at a wide range of work and they all have different kinds of expertise. So yeah, we're going to get straight into it and begin by talking about some of the projects which sort of really stood out this year. And then later on, we're going to have a broader discussion where we aim to get some perspective from the last year and think about what's influenced and driven standout work. So firstly, I want to come to Tarek Atrisi, who's founder and creative director of Tarek Atrisi Design, and Tarek is our typography expert. Yeah, I wondered if you could tell us a bit about a project which really stood out for you and why you chose it.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, I was heading the typography jury, and there was actually a lot of interesting projects. I mean, typography as a discipline is wide, so we saw all kind of projects from branding to application of typography in books, in packaging, in classic printed material, or in digital and media context. Finally, the project I've chosen is the branding of the San Francisco Symphony. This was one of the projects that stood out. And interestingly, it was one of the projects that all jury members really loved. I mean, the jury, I think, was very critical on project. It's a tough panel judging projects. This was really the project that everybody loved, all jury members. And this is why I chose it as well.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of this too, and I've noticed it's been reported a lot in the last year across the design press, and it looks great in any sort of static application, but also when it animates with music, you're basically just listening to type. Do you think it's partly its adaptability which gives it its strength? So it's like outdoors on flags, it's on posters and shows, and it's animated. It seems to work everywhere.
I think it's the fact that it's brilliantly executed, that even if you see it in a static mode, it's very dynamic. And when it's dynamic, it's a brilliant use actually of technology. And it's the best I've seen actually in the use of variable type so far. So it's a lot of things. I think it's a very strong typographic brand that's flawlessly executed. But the way technology has been incorporated in design, the way it's dynamic even when it's static, the way that its animated possibilities are endless, the fact that it's very traditional and classic, it's classic and it reflects what it represents, but at the same time it's very contemporary. Yeah, all this makes it stand out, definitely.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And Min, I'm going to come to you next. So this is Min Young Kim, who's a freelance typography consultant, and she's our type design expert. So yeah, can you tell us about a project that you picked out and yeah, why you thought it was showed design excellence?
So I picked two works because both of them were so good. I couldn't choose one of them. And so first one is a climate crisis font. So this font literally shows the terrible consequence of the climate change that we are facing, and with the variable font feature. And for example, so there's a lot of styles in the font, and style names are in the ears. So the style 2050, the font is melted away and barely still able to read out. And so this font shows what will happen to our Earth if we keep this road. And what this piece speaks strongly, aside from the theme, is that so not all the design works are about advertisement or sales, and they don't have to be capitalist. And that's where it really hit me. And of course, not to mention the execution is wonderful. So the font itself is already very attractive. So having this strong ideologic message in the work is what makes this piece especially special to be in the shortlist. And the second piece is this script typeface. The title on the web website of the D&AD is amazingly real looking handwritten messages. So this script font is a color font and also has so many alternative glyphs and stylistic sets. And I know there's a lot of fonts that has a lot of stylistic sets and has a great type engineering features, but what's very attractive about this is that playful mind and creativity of this font. Like, for example, so not only the font itself really looks handwritten, I still can't believe it's a font, but for example, there's a lot of strike through designs, and it's not just like a line in the middle. It's like a zigzag lines like we actually do when we handwrite. And with the colon and brackets, it becomes actual smiley face, and it's really, really cute. And also one of the jury while judging said that the ultimate goal of the typeface is to make it look exactly like handwriting, because that's where the type design started. So in that case, this font cannot be achieving higher goals than other works. So that's where this work is very special.
Okay, yeah, I mean, they're both really memorable projects. I was just going to pick up on the climate crisis font first of all. So this is another sort of great example of type, which is a visual metaphor for something. And as you said, in this case, it's the melting of polar ice. And we might get to talk about its sort of social purpose later, but yeah, the fact it was designed open source to help other organizations tell stories about the climate crisis really speaks volumes. But I wanted to ask if it would have been kind of difficult to do, because it feels like it's a real technical achievement. Was that something that you noticed when you were looking through it?
The great thing about this font is that it doesn't just melt away. It still can read. We can still read what it's written, even though it's all melted away. So in that case, it should have needed a lot of tests and redesigning on readability.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, as you say, it still works, doesn't it? Even when it's in its most faint and sort of terrifying form. Okay, well, thanks for that. I'm going to come to Gush next. Gush Monday, founder of Bulletproof, and he's our packaging design expert. Yeah, Gush, can you tell us about the project that stood out for you, please?
For me, there was a piece of work by a Brazilian agency for Hershey out of Brazil, which was commemorating International Women's Day. So it was a piece of packaging on their primary kind of chocolate bars. And what I loved about it was the simplicity, the boldness, of it. The message was really strong. And they treated it all like a canvas, so it was using packaging actually as a communication tool, because it is, I think people overlook that. And it had great shelf standout, amazing messages. And what they've done is obviously they've split the words her and she, from Hershey, and then they've commissioned and worked with a plethora of different female entrepreneurs, artists, dancers, musicians, to create individual packaging. And it was just, what I thought was particularly stand out about it was that Hershey had, been brave about the pack takeover. I think so often when we see this kind of work, we see that this could have been a flash, it could have been 20% of the packaging, but actually it was a complete pack takeover as part of a bigger piece of thinking. So I love the fact that it was a really strong idea. I love the fact that it was executed very, very beautifully and very boldly, and although there were several different executions, it all had a synergy to it that was standout actually. So yeah, it was a fantastic bit of work. I think also it reached the audience, and they had 1 billion impressions, within a very, very short space of time. So again, for me, one of the particular measures of success is it doing its job? Is it reaching the right audience? Is it creating sales? Is it creating communication within social channels? and it really did. So it was a it was a standout piece of work for me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it can be so easy to sort of get this kind of thing wrong. And I mean, thinking about a different topic, but I've seen lots of examples with the LGBTQ community being very split on brands co-opting the rainbow flag, for example, and rainbow washing packaging, which can feel a bit cynical for some people. So yeah, to be able to look at International Women's Day and take what started as a bit of clever wordplay with the HerShe thing and use packaging as a canvas for an exhibition, particularly at a time when nobody can go to any, really adds something to the conversation. But yeah, I was going to ask you, I guess the HerShe eureka moment can be a bit of a gift to a designer, but there's still a lot to do in terms of the strategy and getting the client on side with something quite subversive and working with the right kind of artists and getting it right on pack. So yeah, it wouldn't have been easy, would it? They would have.
It wouldn't have been. I think some of the best work, right, is when you see it and you go, that's obvious, right? But actually, maybe it wasn't. You know, maybe it is a gift, but you've got to unearth it. You know, and then there's the whole convincing a client. When you've got a client which is okay, it's HerShe Brazil, but it's going to go up to HerShe US, right? And so you've got a very, very large corporation, and you're asking them to be very brave about something. You know, this is their brand mark that you're basically dissecting, taking it apart. You know, and so that takes a lot of convincing, I think. You know, and so hats off to the agency and definitely to the client for allowing that, you know, to happen. As I say, these things are so often relegated to like a third of the pack or a fifth of the pack or back of pack. You know, so I think to lead with that would have been it's a difficult decision, and I think a brave one, and it looks great, you know, so yeah.
Cool. All right, thanks, Kush. Jack, I'm going to come to you now. This is Jack Rennick, who's founder and creative director of Jack Rennick Studio, and she is our branding expert. So Jack, tell us about what stood out for you this year.
Actually, I think we were quite lucky in our jury that we had loads of beautiful work to look at, and felt quite spoiled. I think you go into these things and you sort of know that only a few things come out the other end, and you're going in looking at 700 pieces of work and trying to find something that's going to sort of stand through all the jury. You know, it's got to the process of it. You know, you've got 9 jurors, and you've got to have 5 yeses on every level to take it into the next stage. And that's really hard. You know, everybody's, it's a fully global jury. Everybody's got their own opinion. Everybody's got their own sort of sense of what is a breakthrough and what versus, you know, what looks stunning. So you're trying to align those 3 commonalities. You know, is it a breakthrough idea? Is it beautifully executed? And is it totally fit for purpose? And sometimes things are 2 of those things. So then it doesn't tick the 3rd box. So it doesn't get moved forward. So we had loads of great debates about all of the stuff. And so a couple of things that stood in my mind was firstly a campaign that started in a high school in Taiwan about addressing school uniforms. And the project was called UNI-FORM, so uniform. And it was addressing, classic school uniforms. Girls wear skirts and boys wear trousers, and that's the rules and that's the way it goes. And that can be quite, quite a tricky balance if you're a gender neutral child or also you just don't want to be pigeonholed and you don't want to be weighed down by traditional wear. If you're a girl and you want to wear trousers, fair enough. And if you're a boy, you want to wear a skirt, go for it. So they ran this campaign uniform, and it was encouraging boys to come to school wearing skirts and to support that girls should be allowed to wear trousers as well. And then a designer and Vogue then got behind this because it was getting a lot of news. And they created this most stunning brand campaign identity and pieces of communications around this uniform piece. And, you know, so they created these sort of like gorgeous uniforms, and they called them, you know, skirts, which was like a mixture of skirts and shorts. And they had all these kids just wearing them around schools, and just beautiful photography of them wearing it in in situation in the classrooms, and really sort of proud. And there was kind of like proud. It was like a real fashion shoot. You can tell, you had like a Vogue art director sort of obviously styling it up. But they were kind of like normal kids, good looking kids. We had a bit of a debate actually about whether we thought the kids were too good looking, and we were like, have they gone round the school? Maybe there's like thousands of kids, and if they pulled out, the best looking ones, and it was like, should they have used the not so good looking kids? But what my impression was, if there's a cool kid in the school and he's wearing a skirt, and people are going, well, if he's wearing it, then that's okay, and that adds some cool and some edge to it, So the whole thing was so beautifully executed, very kind of on trend color palettes and typography and messaging, and the whole thing just hung together just really cool editorial piece. It felt like, branded editorial. So we felt as a tactical campaign to get kids to wear whatever they wanted to school. Not that you can go in wearing your jeans, but creating uniforms that were gender neutral. We thought was brilliant, and such a clever thing to do. And when you're judging these things as well, it's so easy to be seduced by work that really makes a difference to society. And you're always kind of going, oh, but this one really does do something, versus, well, this is an identity for a bank, or this is an identity for an accountancy firm, or something like that. And you have to divorce yourself from the feel-good factor that things give you, and actually be judging things on the merit of what the category is that it's in, and the job that it's actually got to do. So I think we beyond the fact that it is addressing cultural change, it was just a fantastic branded piece of content, and looked stunning. I hope somebody can see it on the screen. It's not in front of us just now.
Yeah.
The kids just look so sort of like mean, the total attitude. They're all like, all the moves and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They're in the classroom, just gorgeous. And then the other piece that I had wanted to talk about was completely on a different thing. This was in logos. This was entered into, and I think in our industry there's always a kind of debate of, well, the stuff that wins D&ADs is always big, massive advertising campaigns, and does it have to be some massive stunt and something that's had billions of pounds spent on it? And then we're looking at logos and going, can a logo win a yellow pencil? And we're like, well, depends if it's a great idea, if it's beautifully executed and it's totally fit for purpose. So the piece that I had chosen was for this brand called Mitka, which was a spray paint brand. And it's the most simplest logo ever. The typography, the 5 letters, just written in like a super bold font. And that's right across the front of the can. And then a little square at the top representing the nozzle. So you just see a can of spray paint through the piece of type in this little square. And once you see it, you just can't not see it. And on the front of the packaging, I don't know if it was entered into packaging, Gush. It probably wouldn't, they wouldn't have maybe thought to do it in packaging, but they use the logo and that changes colour depending on the colour of the paint. And there's nothing else on it. That's it. Across the whole cans is just its name, and on the actual lid there's a wee printed square of that colour as well. So it really sort of delivers on telling me what that stuff is. It's paint. It tells me what that brand name is. I can't miss it. It's not hidden in a corner somewhere. And it gives me the impression that this paint is going to give you a really solid coverage. It's like, the sort of bold use of the typography on it. There's not a lot of gaps missing, so you think, right, that is going to be really solid spray paint and it's going to do its job. And I think when they were set that brief, the spray paint owners were kind of like, we're not Picassos or trying to make, like beautiful art. This is about, paint that does its job. And that's exactly how that works on the can and on the communications. Just totally simple, and we thought it was absolutely killer.
Well, both standout projects again. But yeah, I just wanted to pick up on UNI-FORM. Yeah, which I absolutely loved. And yeah, I feel like the branding has really allowed the project to sort of speak for itself here, which is really important. And although it's very bold and colourful, and again got some good wordplay there, the emphasis on the photography and on the uniforms themselves kind of allows us to really quickly understand what's being explored. And again, it's a project is underpinned by a powerful social message. But would you agree that the sort of the strength of this is that you see the idea in the product, but maybe not the branding? The branding stands back, and it's really, like you said, art direction and photography as well. It's all part of the package, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's creating a kind of brand world there, you know, and a brand feeling for the uniforms themselves. So you get a sense of them being very on fashion because of the styling that's been chosen for the typography, the colour palettes, very RGB kind of vibes. But you get a sense that the clothing themselves has a bit of longevity to it, and that it will stand more of the test of time. I can imagine each they would have like different communication campaigns that could evolve, and sort of building out the colour palettes, building out the fonts and everything. But I think the styling of it, the art direction probably was part of the strongest bit of the brand. And it's great if you can have a brand that is recognisable purely by art direction. That's strong.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So we're going to move things on a bit now and look at some of the sort of bigger picture stuff. So yeah, if I was sort of to be very reductive, I'd say 2020 has been about a global pandemic, obviously, which has been the backdrop for everything. But at the same time, a rise in social awareness, partly because even if we were trapped inside, we've been trying to understand what's going on outside better. Digital infrastructure has expanded, aiding communication for many, but excluding many others. We've had culture wars playing out across social media, which has polarised a lot of people ideologically and politically. But we've also seen communities coming together to help each other and support local causes. And the social awareness that I mentioned before has also led to the championing of social causes. So most prominently, Black Lives Matter in 2020, but also around the climate crisis, sustainability, women's safety on the streets, many other things. So if we think about all of this, the common thread here is that these issues are unignorable, and I think it's that sort of not ignoring things which consumers are starting to expect of brands, and that they use their platforms to challenge and engage. And it's fallen on designers and creatives to help brands tell these compelling stories with these things in mind. So some of the projects that you've all picked out today are a great reflection of this. And I wanted to ask, first of all, what do designers have to do to make sure that the work that they're creating is authentic and contributes something to a social issue that's being tackled? I don't know who wants to pick up on that.
Gush's project was talking about, you know, like the HerShe project for Hershey's. There's a lot of projects where you can see that brands are visibly making an attempt to look like they're doing great, whether that's societal or environmentally, you know, sort of greenwashing over things. And it's sort of like, is this living up to your brand values, or is this, you know, you're kind of like catching up a bit later with the zeitgeist and where things are moving, and you better hurry up and do something quickly. And you can see that, but I think you can see that a mile away. You can see there isn't any soul in the work. And I think when you're tackling that, it's like your duty as a designer to make sure that you're doing your homework and you're aware of what is going on of the issue. You know, it's like don't look to design books for your inspiration. Look to the news. You know, if you want to know what is going on in society, and then how you can help advise your clients with it, every opportunity that you've got, whether that's to be more sustainable, whether it's to be more supportive of issues. You can't crowbar them in. You know, as soon as you crowbar them in and it doesn't fit with what the brand sells or what the brand that's when you can just see it a mile away. So it's what I always see when we're approaching brands is to try and get the sort of strategic direction of the business to be thinking in that direction rather than doing a bit of graphic design.
I suppose it's fair to say there's a lot more of this kind of stuff this year, and I guess if the work's good and it's tackling these issues in a genuine way, then this kind of commercial element takes care of itself, doesn't it? There's no need for perhaps the hard sell in the way that there used to be.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's about being authentic to it. You've got to actually deliver on it. You know, what is it that you're doing? There's no point in, you know, a brand, you know, is using slave labor and then saying, you know, how fantastic and how fantastic they are in supporting, you know, gender neutral issues or whatever like that. It's like, you know, hang on, you know, so that's where I feel it's down to the designer and the team behind that not to be agreeing to projects like that. And it's kind of like, no, hang on a minute, and you have to stand your ground on that and say, no, you can't be doing this, and then expecting to people to land and believe in a message that's saying this other thing.
I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier as well, Jack, about brand world, you know, and if you've got one component that's speaking about one thing and actually you're behaving in another way completely across, you know, the plethora of different touch points, then, you know, it's not cohesive, and your audience really picks up on that, you know. So your communication, you've got to really live and breathe it. The brand has got to really live and breathe the message, you know. There's no point, for example, Hershey, you know, speaking about International Women's Day and then, you know, not promoting women, for example, within their workforce, right? You know, so because our audience is super switched on into all these different channels, you know, so they pick up on things and they connect, you know, brands through a red thread, through an intellectual thread, you know, where many marketeers don't do that, because actually they're thinking about, well, I just have to launch this at this point, you know, and not thinking about the narrative in a bigger context. So I think that's really important. I think, you know, about collaboration, you know, I think what I loved about the Hershey piece of work was that they collaborated with different artists and illustrators and allowed them to, you know, because they couldn't do it themselves, you know, that was unauthentic. So you actually give the canvas over, you know, and create a collaboration, which in itself creates a bit of magnetism, you know, to it. So I think that's the way you do it. And I think you have to have a strong moral code. You know, you've got to have your values and your ethics, and either the client agrees with them and you create a mutual respect, and, you know, in order to create a piece of work, well, you've got to be brave enough to say, yeah, it's not for us. I think the best work, you can see this an absolute kind of symbiosis, you know, of what the agency is thinking, what the client is thinking, for the betterment of the audience, you know, and that's the work that really excels, you know. Just going back, Jack, to your just a very quick point on Mitka, you know, I hadn't seen it, they hadn't entered it, and I Googled it whilst I wasn't being rude, I was Googling it. I wasn't ordering Deliveroo or anything, don't worry. I wish they had. It's a beautiful bit of work.
Isn't it?
Really, really fantastic bit of work. And doesn't hurt that my background has been graph, you know, for many years. But I would have loved to have seen that in packaging, just as a side note. So don't know why it wasn't there.
I know. We were just sort of, you know, how can you get so excited about a little mark? And
beautiful,
isn't it? You know, it just, you don't need anything else. I was like, how could you make this better?
Yeah, really strong.
Yeah.
I think, as you said, it's designers now have the responsibility to try to convince their brand to take the right path. But at the same time, I could see in many of the submissions that a lot of independent designers and independent project or self-initiated projects were trying to do that. And maybe that's another way to do it as well, to kind of put pressure on brands to take this approach. One of the projects was called the Polite Typeface. And the Polite Typeface was a typeface that automatically censors any sorts of bullying. You know, if you install it and you use it, anyone who's trying to tell you something bad, it gets automatically blurred out. And I think that's kind of very interesting, creative way to, as you say, finding a problem and then use your creativity within almost, you would say, that limiting typography discipline to do something that has a lot of effect. And imagine, and as conceptual as this was, it worked well. It was fairly well done and executed. But imagine if it happens the other way around, then when a brand starts using this kind of fonts or this kind of projects, for example, you will be adopting the designer's vision to solve a problem.
How do we really make that difference? You know, it's like we're asked to do one job, but how can we do a bigger job, you know? And that's what we're always trying to push for, because I guess that's what makes people tick, really, you know, is that, you know, you're doing it for that bigger purpose, and you're always trying to find that, even if that is doing a corporate identity for something that you wouldn't think had that potential.
Being really honest, I think in the packaging category that I was judging, there wasn't enough of it, to be honest. So there wasn't enough thought around, you know, sustainability and, you know, the environmental impact that packaging really has to play a vital role within, you know. And so I was a little disappointed, actually, that there wasn't more of that thought. You know, there was a lot of aesthetic, you know, and I feel we as an industry, you know, design in the broad sense and packaging especially needs to do much more, you know, in that. Just convincing clients that you've got to use these substrates. This is what you have to use. You know, you have to start thinking about these kind of inks. You know, you have to think about the long-term effect of the, you know, the millions, if not billions, of cartons, you know, that this is being printed on. You know, and so and you know, I think if they're smart enough and they're strong enough to do that, you know, consumers will go along on that journey. You know, doesn't matter if it's more money. Seriously, you can pass that cost on if you wanted to. And I think consumers would, so long as it's all about dialogue, right? It's all about, like you were saying, being authentic, being honest. And so if you communicate that and you communicate the benefit to you as a family, you as individuals, the planet as a whole, I think people will come along with the journey. It's how you create that story, tell it, and people will follow. They really will. So we didn't see enough of that in the packaging category, unfortunately. We in the packaging jury, we had about 400 entries, I think. There was about 340, something like that were actually physically there. And when you're picking them up and you're just seeing the sort of size and scale of some of the packaging, you're thinking, does it need to be this many layers? Does it need to be this big? There was a piece of packaging for a very famous shoe brand. I won't mention it, but the package was, I mean, it was in the promotional category, but the package was like 1.2 meters, you know, by about 800, you know, and
right.
And I was looking at it and going, okay, so where's the hidden compartment? You know, where's the, you know, and there's plastic in there. There's all, you know, this could have been something that is much smaller, much more beautiful, much more considered, you know. I mean, just the shipping cost on, you know, on that. So that's what I mean about businesses, brands, designers, agencies having to think much more about the footprint, you know, that they're creating, you know.
I think the idea of kind of a lot of these projects maybe being open source or people being able to share them with other organisations. I thought that was interesting with the climate font. It's a brand kind of looking further than their own customers and getting designers to kind of help with that. Were there any other examples of anything like that? Is that a theme that we've seen elsewhere across the board?
And it is difficult to try and divorce yourself from, is this a great idea? Is it beautifully executed? Is it fit for purpose? But part of that fit for purpose comes into automatic sustainability, and is this doing the right thing? That's what fit for purpose really is. Mm-hmm. And that's where, you know, and I'm quite sure as a packaging juror, it's like you can't help but think this is complete excess, and that's not clever, you know. And you know, it becomes like a hygiene factor almost, that, you know, if you're not considerate of those things, then, you know, that is not a good piece of design or a good piece of communication.
Yeah. It's exactly that. Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah. Is there anything more kind of trend based that you've noticed this year that you thought was important that you kept seeing?
As you all talked about, there are a lot of works that includes social messages or ideological messages and stuff, but it just felt like some of the works were just having those covers, but not actually thinking about it. Like it's trying to talk about discrimination, but it is kind of creating discrimination. So it's kind of becoming a trend to talk about those stuff in the work. So that's where, I'm just concerned in this time that it's just because it's a very controversial topic. We have to talk about it a lot and more easily, but we shouldn't put those into the works too easily.
Maybe some of you can sort of tell us about what your sort of key takeaways were from kind of stepping back and looking at everything you've seen this year.
It felt like there was a lot of sincerity behind what people were doing. And I don't know if that's been part of the frame of mind that people are in, is, if you're going to do something, then make it count, make it worth it, and, really be considerate about what you're doing. It was just a kind of feeling that I was getting from the work. There wasn't so many kind of throwaway an identity for a piece of nonsense, if you know what I mean, that didn't really require to exist. It felt like, there was a lot more, the things felt important. That was what I was feeling with the work that we were reviewing.
A beautiful design is not enough anymore. It can be very nicely done, very well executed, but today not enough. And certainly that proved in the final selections of the awarded pieces.
Yeah. People, I think, are looking for more than that. I mean, we had an absolutely gorgeous makeup range that had been entered that was just so like random. It's called About Face, and you'll see it in the shortlist there. Every piece was different. The bits of packaging were different. It all looked a bit like a kind of bargain bin, and boots or Superdrug or something, stuff that was all reduced. It was so sort of crazy and disparate, but it was all everything was there for a reason. It managed to sort of capture this sort of throwaway feeling, but done very, very carefully and very considered. That when you actually looked at it, you realised how clever each bit was, without it being too sincere. If you know what I mean. I was going to say on fashion earlier. I don't know if you guys were seeing it in your category. In trends was like a load of Art Nouveau style. Typography that's being used, as if folk have sort of like discovered an old font library again, and everything's got a bit of Art Nouveau vibe to it. It's like a bit melty or a bit swirly, or loads of stuff is looking like that, which a lot of the stuff then you're seeing is almost kind of out of date before it's even got to the judging. It's so trend led that it's boring by the time you look at it. When you're creating a brand and you've got a duty to make, depending on what it is, it might be just a quick campaign, but you're trying to make things that last a bit longer and going for those trends. That brand's going to need, the brands are going to need a refresh very soon, because they're already dating. Just
not enough ideas, not enough kind of big ideas in the packaging. So a lot of it, unfortunately, was beautifully executed. There were some lovely aesthetic pieces, whether it was Art Nouveau or taking inspiration from something else, but actually what was the idea behind that? There just wasn't enough of that for me in our category this year overall, which was a great shame. And the ones that really did separate, I think, the really good stuff from the stuff that was good, to middling, is the work that was beautifully executed with a really strong idea and conviction behind it. And that's what was standout.
Brilliant. I think, Tarek, you were talking about sort of variable fonts being a thing that you were seeing quite a bit, and we saw a lot of that as well. And to your point, Gush, variable fonts is not a concept. It's that is a styling technique.
It's execution. Yeah, it's an aesthetic.
That is not what the idea is. The idea isn't variable font. That is a tool. So I think something like the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra is done really beautifully, and there's a real idea behind the use of the variable font there. The variable font is making a sound in its use. It's not just moving about and being fat or thin for the sake of it. It's got a real purpose there, and that it rises it way above other things just using it because, you know, you can. It's not really delivering the concept or the message very well.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as they've done variable fonts, they've done it well and for a purpose.
I'm going to say thank you to all of you, to Jack and to Gush, to Tarek and to Min. But yeah, it's been great. Thank you very much.